Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is time for the annual mid-year reading check-in, and so I'm not gonna just, let go. Olivia, just talk, okay? Let's get started. So the first book I read this year is The Big Sleep by Raymond Chandler. Raymond Chandler is a notable screenwriter from the 1940s. He wrote a lot of scripts and adapted a lot of his own works into the classic film noirs of that era in the 1940s. This is one of his first books that he ever wrote and then would later adapt into a film starring Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Love the movie. The book is about a dying billionaire. He hires a private eye, Philip Marlowe, to handle a blackmailer that is blackmailing his daughter that is involved in some salacious exploits, if you will. There's murder, there's extortion. It's a very good crime novel. However, I did not like the book. I did not like the genre of book. Films, I could watch those all day. Book, slow. I understand that it's written in the 1940s, so there's gonna be some racist, sexist descriptions in this. I knew what I was getting myself into, and the same goes for the film. But reading it, I was just like, oh my God, who cares? Who cares? Highly recommend the movies, not so much as books, but in terms of me wanting to explore it because I like the genre, was worth doing. And I can appreciate the historical aspect of it and the Pulp Fiction that was then adapted into this incredibly popular film genre of noir that is so deeply ingrained into classic Hollywood. It's been spoofed a million times. Anytime you see a black and white episode of a cartoon where they have voiceover, that's what they're spoofing. They're spoofing Philip Marlowe, but it's books, but the original content that it comes from, I'm kind of mid on. The next book I read, I was so excited to get this. This was a pre-order. One of my favorite content creators on YouTube, on any platform really, is Lena Norms. She makes videos about everything, honestly, all the things that I'm interested in. She talks about musicals, she talks about film, she talks about books, she talks about climate change, she talks about, not wanting to do fast fashion, she talks about teaching herself to sew, she talks about veganism and all the fun stuff. And so we have her book, which is Half-Ass Human, where she basically talks about not burning out, but she talks about it, she's funny, genuinely funny, but she just talks about how you don't need to, it's not 100% or nothing kind of ideology where you half-ass everything. The table of contents here says half-ass manifesto, half-ass choices, half-ass style, half-ass career, half-ass vegan, half-ass home, half-ass body, which it refers to taking care of your health. You don't need to be a gym rat, you just need to move your fucking body, which is something I could stand to hear every once in a while. Half-ass hope, and then what is actually worth whole-assing, because if you half-ass everything through life, you're not going to be too happy. So highly recommend this. I loved it. It was interesting. It just was good. It was just good. So 5-star read. Next is a poetry collection by Morgan Parker, and this is called There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce. I'm gonna actually read you what the blurb says on the inside because I think that will do more justice than anything. But like I said, poetry collection, and I've tabbed the ones that have stood out to me. The only thing more beautiful than Beyonce is God, and God is a black woman sipping rosé and drawing a lavender bath, texting her mom, belly laughing in the therapist's office, feeling unloved, being on display, daring to survive. Morgan Parker stands at the intersections of vulnerability and performance, of desire and disgust, of tragedy and excellence. Unrelentingly feminist, tender, ruthless, and sequined, these poems are an altar to the complexities of Black American womanhood in the age of non-indictments and deja vu, and a time of wars over bodies and power. These poems celebrate and mourn. They are a chorus chanting, "You're gonna give us what we need." So my interpretation of a lot of these poems were basically just very artistic interpretations of what it's like to exist as a woman in a black body, especially the ones that I think stood out the most were the ones where she talks about Beyonce specifically, and how she's heralded as the pinnacle of Black femininity, that is the gold standard, and how she subverts it but also loves and respects her as well. Very interesting read, totally worth reading. I'm glad I did. And there are, actually, now that I look at where all the folds are, there were a lot that stood out to me. So they're not clear-cut stories. You kind of have to be able to interpret poems and kind of teach yourself how to read poetry, but it is totally worth it. And I think poetry is a great way to just kind of like let the words wash over you and sit. It's very much so something that is meant to be experienced before you intellectualize it, so you kind of have to read it and reread it again. Next, I listened to an audiobook while I was walking around here in the winter, and I listened to Carmilla. I listened to the Jay Sheridan LaFonnelle and Robin Brooks version. That's the Audible version. It's very contemporary, it's very condensed, and it's enjoyable. I would say that that is like the most on the nose interpretation of Carmilla that I've ever seen. I was kind of in the middle of a Nosferatu Dracula mindset, and I just wanted to read Carmilla because it predates Dracula by at least 20 years, and a lot of the lore in Dracula by Bram Stoker shows up in Carmilla. It's very like, it's copy and paste as far as I'm concerned. But of course, the lesbian book gets forgotten about and not talked about, while Dracula is held as and heralded as the #1. But I will say the version that I listened to, the Audible version, like I said, on the nose, explicitly horny. It's not like a smut book, but it's also like, okay, damn. It was fun. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 5 stars because it was just a fun thing to listen to on my walks. The next 3 books I'm counting as like one thing because it's a series, but I did read 3 books. They're all over 500 pages. I've read them in like 4 days each, so a week and a half, and I've talked about this series plenty, but I love them so much because the 3rd one came out. This is The Legend-Born Cycle by Tracy Deonn. Let me show you these covers, right? We're not gonna just look at the spine. This is Legend-Born. I reread this because we were getting the 3rd one in the series. So Bree Matthews, her mother dies under mysterious circumstances, but she's determined to move on with her life and solve her mother's murder. So she goes to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. She finds herself in a secret society that is derived from Arthurian legend. And within that, she also finds her own power that comes from her ancestors. It's called root magic in the book, but it's mostly known as hoodoo and voodoo in the real world. So I love it. The book itself, this one specifically deals with grief and racism and growing up it's a very good coming of age story and finding your own power, and I just love it so much. It's so good. It is YA, but as I've said before, YA books that don't talk down to their audience are superior because kids are smart and they know what the heck's going on. So loved it. Then I reread the 2nd one, which is Bloodmarked. This is like pure paranormal romance, fun love triangle, but a well-written love triangle because there's mutual yearning in every direction. All 3 of them have crushes on each other, and it's like so good. Again, more so to do with grief, racism, finding your own power. Love this. And then we have the new one, which is Oathbound, which is the 2nd to last one. We have one more book. So we were setting up some major plot points in this that were just so important. And the ending made me go, what? I think I screamed. I love a good fantasy coming of age story. They're just my favorite always. So again, all 3 of these are 5-star reads. They're fantastic books. I highly recommend them. And if you don't like fantasy, I don't know what you're doing here because my whole life is fantasy novels. This next one is an audiobook I listened to called I Love You, I Love You, I Love You. This is a fantastic audiobook. I'm not gonna lie to you, sorry, I need to scroll to my review that I wrote on Instagram. I have not liked romance in a really long time, and by a really long time I mean like a year and a half. I read Happy Place by Emily Henry, who was one of my favorite romance authors, and I thought it was so bad, and every romance I picked up I felt like was just a copy and paste of the same plot, the same situation, the same lack of communication. It was just tropey and bad, and I didn't want anything to do with it. So then someone said, oh, if you're looking for something a little more adult, an adult meaning mature, not explicit, you should check out I Love You, I Love You, I Love You. And I was like, okay, cool. And it is this story of Ella and her friend Lo, who meet when they're 14, and it is their long kind of relationship from being teenagers and friends and growing up together, and then eventually they finally get together when they're 30. And so there's loss and friendship and arguments, and it's so well written and it feels like real people. And it wasn't like, oh, one friend pines for the other and then, oh, I guess I'll be with you because I'm single at the time. It is genuine, like, wanting to be together. They both pined for each other, but it was just life happens. And so sometimes you're not with the person for a really long time, but you want to keep that. It was so good. I just read it, damn it. And actually listen to the audiobook, because that's how I read it. And it was fantastic. So highly recommend. Next, I read Medusa. So I hope you're familiar with the story of Medusa, who the original story is that she betrays Athena with Poseidon in Athena's temple in Athens. And so Athena, feeling hurt and betrayed, curses Medusa with her powers of the snakes in her hair, and when she looks at anyone, they turn to stone. And that the original ideology behind that story was that, you don't betray the gods. They're vengeful, they're wrathful, don't interfere in that. This is your eternal punishment for that. But instead, this story has taken on new life in very recent years. Medusa has recently become a symbol for sexual assault survivors. If you see anyone with a tattoo, or you see like a restaurant, bars, what have you, tattoo parlors, a lot of them will have the Medusa head, and that marks it as a safe space. And so to put that contemporary adaptation of it in a book instead, where Medusa is sexually assaulted by Poseidon, and then Athena curses her because she wants to save face, but also kind of gives her this superpower to defend herself against anyone who would use her body in a way that she doesn't consent to. Very interesting. However, when it's in a book, I hate when you do that. Oh, come on, jerk face. What was I saying? It read young. It lacked poetic prose and nuanced storytelling. It was very like, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, this is what she learned. It just didn't have, there's a cat, are you serious? It just didn't give what I wanted it to give. I would recommend it to high school age. It doesn't mean it was bad, it just didn't feel like it was at the reading level that I wanted it to be at. So for that, it gets a 3. Like, it's fine. It's fine. I think if I'm gonna continue with Greek mythology, I want Madeline Miller style adaptations. And for those of you who don't know, Madeline Miller wrote Song of Achilles and Circe, and she has a 3rd one coming out eventually. That's my favorite. And then the last book I read this year so far has been The Wedding People by Alison Espach. I'm reading off my laptop, please excuse me. So the person that recommended I Love You, I Love You, I Love You to me also recommended The Wedding People, and the theme of that was non-cookie cutter romances. I wouldn't call The Wedding People a romance. It's definitely literary fiction. It takes place in Newport, Rhode Island, which is a place that I lived when I was like 6 or 7. So I hadn't been there in a while, but I miss New England every single day with every fiber of my being. It's something I think about every single day. That's not the point of this book, but I'm happy to read anything that takes place in New England. That's what I'm getting at. Phoebe is going to check into this swanky hotel in Rhode Island, but she's the only person at that hotel who's not there for a wedding, and she was supposed to be there with her husband, but her husband has divorced her. She's had infertility issues, and so she's very much so at rock bottom. That cat, I swear to God, Evie, my other cat, is being an absolute angel, just sitting on the floor. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so Phoebe has hit rock bottom, and she's there to, so trigger warning, suicidal ideation. It's not talked in depth, really. But if that's something you're sensitive to, I just want you to be aware of it. She says that to the bride because she's like, I don't care. And so they form an unlikely friendship during the week that Phoebe is there. And it's a story of unlikely friendship, of kind of coming out of a dark depression and doing better. I just thought it was interesting. It leaves a lot open-ended. You don't get anything really answered as to like what Phoebe's future is. You just see her that week that she's in Rhode Island. So I liked it. I thought it was a good nuanced story. It's like a fun, I would call this a beach read, but it's not like a silly, goofy beach read. Like, it's got weight to it, but was lighthearted enough that I was like, this would be great to take on vacation. Who sometimes want something just a like touch more intellectual than like a cookie cutter romance. So glad I read it. I will say, I listened to the audiobook, and the person who narrated the audiobook has clearly never stepped foot in New England once in their life. So here's what drove me freaking insane. For starters, couldn't pronounce Pawtucket. Kept saying Pawtucket. I was like, it's Pawtucket. Like, I grew up in the town next to Pawtucket, so I should know, and I'm not just like, it's not even hard to say. I know it's spelt Pawtucket, but it's Pawtucket. The other thing was that there were characters who were very specifically described as having a Rhode Island accent. I know a New England accent is hard to do. I don't have one. I don't do them. But they should have found someone who could do one for those specific characters. And then there was one point in time where the narrator did do one because the main character, Phoebe, was like making fun of someone. And that would have actually like been good to have in the audiobook because it really wasn't actually that horrific. I don't know, it was inconsistent, it felt weird, it drove me insane. Wasn't a fan of that at all. Oh, my other critique of the audiobook specifically, I don't know if like this is not going to happen if you read like the text of it. It was so clearly recorded in two separate studios because every other line, one was like really high quality, nice and clear, the other like the next line would be super muffled and sounds like it was recorded in a home studio, which like is fine, but I want the audio consistent so that way it doesn't pull me out of the story. Kind of thumbs down on the audiobook version of it, but I will say thumbs up from, you know, born and bred New Englander talking about Flo's Clam Shack. So I was like, damn, all right, this person knows. Molly, no. What we're not doing, we're not in and out. This is not a game of musical rooms. Stop it. What did I give that rate? Oh, I gave it a 3.5. So yeah, overall, it was good. I'm glad I read it. So that brings me to my current reads. I am currently reading Emma by Jane Austen because I don't know about you, but I personally like to pick up a classic every once in a while, not only because they challenge me, but I just have a curious mind and I'm always like, I want to know what makes the classics so classic. Do they hold up? Do they not? Is this just a case of white people dominating culture? Does it actually have anything to say positive? And I think that Jane Austen, after reading Pride and Prejudice about 3 years ago at this point, she has a lot to say about society and being a woman in society in the Regency era. And I think that it's missed because of the romance, but she gives her protagonist like the best case scenario, right? Like you still have to get married. It's not all doom and gloom, but they're like, she gives them a love match. And it's like I said, best case, like, yeah, you have to get married and care. And like this marriage secures wealth, but I'm going to give you someone that you actually like. So good on her. I am only about 60 pages into Emma. She is not the most likable of her heroines, and I love that. I love a nasty, unlikable woman, so we're good with this. I will say, however, at the time of recording it is June 9th, which means that I have the new V.E. Schwab book in the mail. I literally got the notification the other day that said that my copy of Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil has been shipped from Barnes & Noble. I'm so excited. Toxic lesbian vampires, that's all I'm going to say. So that's my Pride Month pick. I do actually have another Pride Month pick that doesn't really come out, but they started promoting it recently. Hold on a second. So I found randomly on TikTok a little quote from this author named Amina Fox. She is promoting, sorry, I'm looking this up. She's promoting her book called Threads of Fate. It is a asexual / gray sexual vampire romance. I read the description, or I read a blurb and I said, holy crap, that is exactly how I experience attraction. So let me read it for you. Here's the excerpt I read. It says, she wasn't dead inside like half the heavily stereotyped asexuals on television were, or the rude genius who thought emotions were beneath them, or the smug, holier-than-thou type who looked down on anyone with a sex drive. Apparently, if you weren't horny 24/7, you had to be a robot and an asshole. And then, you know, more skip. Her boyfriend, she loved her boyfriend, obviously, and as of late, a few vampires. Apparently, blood-sucking immortals had snuck their way onto the list. So, relatable, exciting, very happy to pre-order that when it comes out. I believe it comes out in November. Anyway, with that, I'm gonna go empty the cats of this bedroom and move on with my day. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what your favorite book you've read so far this year is, what you're currently reading, and what you are going to read. See you guys later. Bye.